Good morning, members of council and staff that are attending and any of the public that are watching our live stream. We'll call this meeting to order, but before we proceed, I'm going to turn it over to the clerk to talk a little bit about our evolving meeting procedures. So, Dina, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger, through you, Madam Mayor. As the viewing public can see, council has moved to attending meetings in person, with staff attending as well, and all measures are in place. Staff and council have been advised of the protocols in place. However, for the viewing public, it's important to note that currently this space in the council chambers is not open to the public, and therefore council members and staff are not required to wear masks per the health unit recommendations. Therefore, council members and staff are maintaining a physical distance of 2 meters that is required. Staff have taken additional precautionary measures in addition to the distancing, and should anyone come within 2 meters of another individual during the course of the meeting, masks have been provided, as well as the table used for staff to present to council has a plexiglass shield, as well as sanitizer and sanitizing wipes to disinfect between any presentations. And I'll turn it back over to you, or if our CAO has any more comments.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The only thing I would mention is that although Town Hall is open to the public, this portion of Town Hall has been closed off to the public, so the public do not have access to the council chamber today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the update, and I'll now ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. If there's none at this time and you become aware of one during the meeting, please bring it to my attention. We will now start with the community service section, deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings. We have none, or sorry, we do have a public meeting, and I'll turn it over to Alan in planning to present that.
Hi. It's normally the section head that would chair this part of the meeting, Joe.
Sorry, Joe, would you mind?
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll
So
turn
if
this.
that's okay, I'll take the
turn this
chair.
over to Councillor Bray. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a public meeting today about a proposed amendment to the Town of Wasaga Beach Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2003-60 as amended. This relates to Lot 54 in Plan 961, municipally described as 25 Wood Avenue, Jose Severiano. The notice of public meeting was mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the subject property on June the 25th, 2020. It was circulated to all agencies, service providers, and school boards by email as prescribed in the Planning Act, and a sign was posted along the frontage of the property on June 25th, 2020. This provided 20 days of notice for the public meeting, and this meeting is therefore properly constituted as required by the Planning Act. Purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the subject property to a residential Type 2 exception, R2, zone to enable its development with a semi-detached dwelling, with site-specific performance standards related to the built form and lot fabric to support the inclusion of accessory dwelling units and the prospective severance of the property. As a result of the circulation of the notice of public meeting, the following written comments were received. Letters of support? None. Letters of no objection? None. Letters of concern? None. Letters of objection? None. Mr. Weeb, have we received any further letters of correspondence in regard to this application?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Town planning staff will now make a brief presentation and will provide further details with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Mr. Weeb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of council and members of the public who may be viewing remotely.
It's down a bit.
Is it not on?
It's down a bit.
Is this better?
Sound good.
Hello? Better? Is there?
Just talk louder. I think.
Okay, thank you. As Madam Chair had indicated, this public meeting is being hosted virtually to present the proposed development of the property at 25 Wood Avenue, the owner of the property being Mr. Jose Severiano, and the application file number is Z01/20. In this presentation, I'll be introducing the application that has been filed on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Severiano, providing an overview of the subject lands and of the development that Mr. Severiano is proposing, provide a summary of the comments received to date, as well as outlining next steps, and thereafter welcoming any questions or comments that members of council may wish to make, in addition to the oral submissions of the applicant and their consultant, to include as part of the record for future consideration in the recommendation report that will come at a later date. This public meeting is required under the Planning Act for applications for zoning bylaw amendment. Town staff are introducing the applicant's proposal to council and to the general public for the purpose of consultation. And this is to provide an opportunity for the sharing of written comments, as well as to provide a forum for members of the public and members of council to make oral submissions before a coordinated committee. As I'd indicated, the application for zoning bylaw amendment Z01/20 was submitted on behalf of Mr. Jose Severiano in December of 2019, and it was deemed complete in June of 2020 after receiving some additional information from the applicant. The application proposes the development of the property legally described as Lot 54 in Plan 961, and that is municipally known as 25 Wood Avenue. The property is located on the east side of Wood Avenue, to the north of Main Street and south of Poplar Glen Road, and immediately north of the parking area for the buildings in the southwest corner of the Stonebridge Town Center commercial area. As shown in the location map in the current slide, the subject lands are outlined in red, municipally addressed as 25 Wood Avenue and legally described as Lot 54 in Plan 961. The property has approximately 18 meters of frontage onto Wood Avenue, a lot depth ranging between 54.41 and 58.26 meters, and an approximate lot area of 1,175 square meters. Surrounding land uses to the south and to the east are the commercial land uses within the Stonebridge Town Center commercial area, and existing land uses to the north and to the west include existing residential development as well as existing vacant residential lots. On June 25th, 2020, a joint notice of complete application and notice of public meeting was issued by way of publication in the newspaper, mailing to all landowners within 120 meters, by email to internal and external stakeholders, and by way of installing signage on the property, as shown in the photographs on the screen to the right. In the town's official plan, as amended by way of amendment number 52, being the downtown planning area official plan amendment, the subject property is designated as downtown core, and designations surrounding the property include the downtown core designation for the Stonebridge commercial area, as well as on the west side of Wood Avenue, the neighborhood designation being the existing residential lots to the north on the east side of Wood Avenue, as well as open space being the green area shown in the image on the right of the slide, which is part of a system that remains in a natural state. The uses permitted within the downtown core designation include existing low-density residential uses, as well as triplex dwellings, fourplex dwellings, and multiple attached dwellings. The zoning of the subject property, as amended by way of the downtown zoning bylaw amendment, is the downtown core hold zone, DCH2 being the acronym. The zoning of surrounding properties include the residential type 1 zone to the north along Wood Avenue, the downtown core mixed use zone, the DC1 zone, as well as the open space zone, which is in the same approximate area as the open space designation, being the green strip to the north and east of the subject property. Permitted uses in the downtown core, this should read zone, include apartment dwelling within a mixed use building, triplex dwellings, fourplex dwellings, and a second suite. Based on the applicant's submission, Mr. Severiano wishes to develop the property to include a semi-detached building with 2 units divided vertically, as shown in the grading plan, and I've included some animations. The thicker black outline identifies the approximate boundaries of the subject property. The blue outline would identify the approximate footprint of the proposed semi-detached dwelling, including covered porches along the front, as well as attached garages that project toward the front lot line relative to the habitable portion of the dwelling, as well as proposed landscaping surrounding the building, as well as the proposed parking area. On behalf of Mr. Severiano, the town has also received simultaneously application for consent to sever B06/20, reflecting that Mr. Severiano's intent, based on those submissions, would be to construct the semi-detached dwelling with the vertical dividing wall, and thereafter to sever into 2 separate lots, allowing for separate forms of tenure for each of the units on either side. On the screen at the moment are the sample elevation and floor plan drawings provided on behalf of Mr. Severiano. On the left, we see the elevation as viewed from Wood Avenue as the proposed elevation, and on the right would be the proposed floor plan drawing with internal layout provided for 1 unit only, but we understand, we've been informed that the intention would be to mirror that same floor plan for the unit on the right. And to make it a little better to view, this is again the extract from the sample elevation drawing, showing the proposed covered porches along the front, as well as the attached garages that would project toward the Wood Avenue frontage. And again, the details are provided for the unit to the left only, but we understand that they would be mirrored for the unit on the right side as well. In this image, I've extracted and rotated the sample floor plan drawing for the unit for which the internal division has been provided to show that within the main dwelling unit for the unit on the left, it would be accessed by way of the covered porch that faces Wood Avenue that would give access into a living and dining area and an open kitchen, and then it would provide access to 3 bedrooms as you approach the rear of the dwelling. What is also notable in the sample floor plan drawing is in the top of this image, you would notice an exterior door that leads directly to a landing and staircase. Based on the applicant's submission, they've indicated that they would also intend to introduce accessory dwelling units into the basement of each side of the semi-detached dwelling, and therefore, cumulatively, the property is proposed to be developed with 4 units. A semi-detached dwelling, which would be proposed to be severed, as well as accessory dwelling units in the basement, which would be accessed from the side exterior walls of the dwelling, and those exterior entrances would therefore not be visible from Wood Avenue. By way of the application, the property owner is specifically requesting a rezoning of the lands to the residential type 2 exception zone. And it is noted that this zone category would permit a semi-detached dwelling unit as well as 1 accessory dwelling unit per lot, subject to compliance with applicable performance standards, including minimum lot frontage, maximum gross floor area allowable for the proposed accessory units. And by way of the site-specific exception zoning, they are requesting deviation in the minimum required lot frontage for a semi-detached dwelling by way of a reduction from 10.6 meters per dwelling unit to 8.5 meters per dwelling unit. And specifically based on the interpretation and application of the zoning bylaw, 1 unit would end up having a frontage of approximately 9 meters. The other, following proposed severance, would have a frontage of approximately 8.9 meters. But to provide some flexibility and a bit of margin of error, they've requested a relief to 8.5 meters per unit. Additionally, they've requested an increase in the maximum allowable gross floor area permitted for the accessory dwelling unit proposed to be in the basement. The zone standard is a maximum of 45% of the total gross floor area of the building, and they've requested relief to go up to 49% of the total gross floor area for the building. We have not yet received floor plan drawings for the basement to confirm the amount of floor area that would be devoted to the accessory dwelling unit. However, given the lack of a utility room within the main level of the dwelling, we would anticipate that a shared utility space would be located out of the floor area of the basement, which would therefore be divided in a prorated fashion across the main dwelling as well as the accessory dwelling for the purpose of this calculation. As of this public meeting today, town staff have not received any written comments with respect to the proposed development of the lands, and town staff will certainly be sure to capture and reflect and provide recommended effects for any written comments that we do receive at the time of submission of a recommendation report for consideration by coordinated committee. As previously indicated, this public meeting is required by the Planning Act, and town staff are presenting the applicant's proposal. Town staff have not yet completed a detailed review of the application, and we will report back at a later date with a recommendation report to coordinated committee once written comments have been received, and we have the opportunity to share those with the applicant and land on a recommended means of disposing of the application by coordinated committee and thereafter council. In terms of next steps, planning staff will continue receiving and considering comments from the public, as well as agency and departmental staff, and we will provide a recommendation report to coordinated committee at a later date for consideration. If any members of the public wish to request additional information about this application, I would ask that they please send an email to myself directly at seniorplandev@wasegabeach.com. Or by way of the other means of getting in touch with myself or other members of planning staff. And in terms of the application processing timeframe, as indicated in the dot line and arrows below, the issuance of the Notice of Complete Application and Public Meeting marks the beginning of the consultation period. This statutory public meeting is right in the middle of that consultation period. However, the consultation period does not end today. We certainly are still welcoming and receiving comments through to the point of council making a decision, and therefore we would welcome any members of the public who do wish to provide comments at a later date to reach out to us and to provide those comments in writing to the extent that they wish. That concludes town staff's portion of the public meeting for the purpose of the presentation, and I'll defer back to yourself, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weeb. Property owner and applicant's consulting partner, Andrew Pascuzzo of Pascuzzo Planning Incorporated, are in attendance. Does the applicant or consultant wish to provide any further details with respect to the proposed development? Is he joining us via Zoom?
Should I skip the presentation? Should I get out of the presentation? Yeah, okay. Is it this button? Is it the red button up top? Stop share. Okay.
Any further details with respect to the proposed development? Is he joining us via Zoom?
Can you hear me?
Good morning, we can hear you.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. There appears to be a bit of a delay.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear us now?
Good morning.
Any further details with respect to the proposed development? Is he joining us via Zoom?
I understand that you're able to hear me. So I'll just proceed with my presentation. I'd like to be, so my name is Andrew Pascuzzo. I'm a registered professional planner here today on behalf of Jose Severiano, the owner of 25 Wood Avenue. Joe is also participating in the meeting today and listening in. I'm obviously here to answer any questions. Alan has done a thorough presentation, so I'm not going to get into details again regarding his materials. I'd like to reiterate that there are no objections that I'm aware of, recognizing that comments from the public could still come in. We are actually hoping that staff can take a staff report based on not hearing any concerns from any of the neighbors to the next potential council meeting, which I understand is at the end of July. Joe is currently a landlord for a number of other residential units in the town, and he obviously wants to continue to offer attainable living opportunities within the municipality. Just to reiterate, the existing lots along Wood Avenue are either singles now or the majority of them are actually still vacant. So the proposed use would suggest respectfully is compatible. It's basically what we're requesting is essentially a down zoning, which typically I don't represent clients on, to be completely honest. Usually I'm asking for a different zoning that would permit additional uses. In this case, the current zoning permits, as Alan has indicated, a triplex or a fourplex or multiple units. In this case, we're requesting a down zoning to 2 semis. But I'd just like to clarify again, as has been stated, that the density of 4 units, so 2 semi-attached units, as well as 2 proposed secondary apartments within the basements of each of the semi-attached units will occur. So 4 units in terms of the density will still be achieved. With regard to my professional opinion, I believe that, and the zoning bylaw amendment will be, it will conform with the growth plan, the Simcoe County official plan, as well as your town of Wasaga Beach official plan. So hopefully you've been able to hear the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any other questions or comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We certainly could hear you. As requested in the notice of public meeting, as of 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday, July 14th, there were no local residents that have registered in advance to make oral submissions at today's virtual public meeting. I will therefore ask members of committee if they have any questions or comments with regards to the proposed development. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of questions for Alan, I guess. The potential here is 4 families, 4 units in occupancy. We have, it wasn't, unless I missed it, it wasn't referenced in the presentation, lot coverage for the proposal. Now I'm looking then at driveway space for 4 families. Normally we require 2 parking spaces per unit, whether one's inside, one's outside in a driveway. That's kind of the standard, but it requires 4 per unit. I'm looking at this and saying, okay, at 2 per unit, where are there 8 parking spaces here, and at the same time maintain the lot coverage requirement? So that's my first question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Councillor Wells' question. Yes, lot coverage, you're correct, was not referenced in the presentation, as the proposed development that we've received in the grading plan would comply with respect to lot coverage. It would comply in all other respects with the R2 zone, with the exception of frontage and potentially the gross floor area occupied by the accessory unit. With respect to parking, The primary dwelling on each side would require 2 spaces for each dwelling. The accessory units in the basement would require 1 space for each unit. And for parking spaces serving the main dwelling and the accessory unit, they are allowed to be provided in tandem, so back to back. And so as proposed, there would be 1 parking space provided in each of the 2 garages, as well as 2 parking spaces within the driveway, all aligned in an end-to-end fashion. So that would be 3 cars, 2 of which would be outside, 1 of which would be in the garage.
So that's within that 8 point whatever meters of frontage?
That would all be entirely outside of the required frontage, and
okay.
that would be in compliance with the zoning bylaw.
And the second question I had was, accessory units, I believe, require a second exit. Now, I noticed that the drawings show this as being significantly above grade. So should for the basement part, I'll call it the basement part. So should I assume therefore that because it's raised significantly above grade, that the second exit is now going to be, for example, a window or something of that nature at grade level? Is that the assumption I should make?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. That is certainly something that they would be needing to address and demonstrate compliance of at the time of application for building permit. I share your inference that given how elevated the floor level is for the main dwelling unit, that a secondary means of egress would be provided by way of a window above grade. We don't have sufficient information at this point to confirm compliance with that component of the building or fire code.
Thank you.
But they would need to demonstrate that through the building permit process.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions? Seeing none, comments received today will be considered, and a decision on this application will be made at a future meeting as to whether committee will recommend the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to proceed further through the approval process. Anyone receiving notice of the public meeting will receive notice of council's decision on this matter. If you did not receive the notice of public meeting and would like to receive a copy of the notice of council's decision, please contact Planning Department, leave your name and address to be added to the circulation list, or make a written request to the clerk of the town of Wasaga Beach. Thank you very much. This public meeting is now over, and I will pass the chair back to Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. We'll now move on to unfinished business. We have none. Other agency reports. We have with us the fire chief. So, Mike, if you want to join us. Do we have to sanitize? Oh.
Good morning. Let's go with this. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just for my monthly report, the fire department responded to 61 calls for service in the month of June. That's a very low number for our average response. As you can see in the spreadsheet, we're down by at least half. As I've explained before, though, this is due to a protocol with our medical responses where we reduced to originally a SARS protocol, and then we moved back to a level B. Our numbers were still down. And just last Thursday, so a week ago, we moved back to our regular level A. So you'll start to see those responses pick up again. So we're back to where we were. We have certainly conveyed that to the medical director, and there were no problems or concerns from him. Other departments didn't even move to a SARS protocol, so they stayed at their level A or their level B. We chose to take the direction of the medical director, and now we've moved back to the level A. With regards to our fire danger rating, we're still sitting at high. We moved to high on July 3rd. We have had some rain, nothing significant enough to reduce that down to moderate. We'll see what happens today. I'm not expecting enough rain to change it, but we'll still be at a high level. In June, we responded to 5 water-related calls. 4 of them turned out to be missing children that were found on the beach safe no issues there. We did unfortunately have a 19-year-old drowned on June 30th, and that was at Shore Lane and 58th Street. That was not a local resident, but a tragedy. We've had several no dollar loss fires, garbage can type fires, some related to fireworks, nothing serious, yard waste bags, those sorts of things. And the last structure fire we had was on May 25th, and that was the one that was a kitchen fire due to careless cooking. So, and that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Is there any questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Joe. Chief, I noticed in the report, we're at this fire alarm activated, no emergencies. 70 something, I think, 72, I think it was, yeah. Are we still, or do we have a follow-up if we're getting repeated non-emergency calls from these systems? I know at one point we were, after the third one, there was a fee charge laid, cost laid against the owners. Is that still in place, and is that still how we're operating?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Wells, yes, that's still our policy. Strike three, you'll receive a charge. So we do monitor the addresses and how often we're responding to the same address and follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
We'll now move to the consent agenda, and before I read that, there's two items been pulled. 3.5.1, Fire Chief's Report dated July 16th, Fire Station 2 roof replacement, and 3.5.2, Director of Recreation Events Facilities Report dated July 16th, 2020, request for unbudgeted expenditure. Does that capture everyone? Okay. So resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee hereby received the July 16th, 2020 consent agenda, item 3.4 through 3.7, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. Can I have a mover and seconder? Mayor Bifalci and, oh, sorry. Yeah, okay, I'll do this one. Mark Kenny was the seconder, and I forgot to read the motion for the fire chief report. So we'll do that now. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee receive the June 2020 Fire Department report for information. Can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Foster and Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. So now we'll, thank you, Chief. We'll now vote on the consent agenda. All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. In both cases, I pulled the item. So in item 3.5.1, the fire chief report, read the emergency roof replacement. I'm just asking for clarification. It's coming to council for approval, and it was approved under an emergency issue, but I believe the limitation for that is $50,000, and that anything over $50,000 was to come to council. That has been a point of contention in previous councils, so I wanted clarification on that. I also wanted to note that the normal RFP process wasn't followed. There were 3 quotes indicated, but the quotes were not provided in the report for the review of council. So if the fire chief wants to speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the quote on the roof replacement actually was lower than the $50,000. It did run over budget with some unforeseen issues that they encountered as they started to work on the roof. So there were additional repairs that, and that was in the contract, and that if they came upon something else, that they may have to deal with it. So the process was followed as far as the under $50,000. Was there, sorry, and
Well, I was just, normally the three quotations might have been provided just so that we had review of that, but maybe that could come at a later date.
I can provide those for council's information if you wish, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The second item, 3.5.2, Director of Recreation Events and Facilities Report dated July 16th, a request for unbudgeted expenditure. I pulled this. That the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee received the July 16th, 2020 Fire Station 2 roof replacement report for information, and further, that the expenditure be funded through the Capital Asset Replacement Reserve. Can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Foster and Councillor Watson. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, and back to the unbudgeted expenditure related to events and recreation. I did try to get a hold of our Director of Recreation, who's, I guess, away at the moment, and have talked to our CEO of the library. And I just thought it would be appropriate for the public to have clarification as to whether or not, although it's unbudgeted, it's funded by a government grant. But in the report, it didn't clearly state that the analysis, the staffing analysis would include the new double pad arena and library. In fact, the library was mentioned in the library minutes, but wasn't, I don't think, specifically mentioned in the report. So Pam, if you could just speak to that.
Thank you. Good morning. This study will be examining the staffing organizational structure for the new Twin Pad Arena and Library Complex that is being proposed to be built and open in 2022. So the consultants are looking at especially ways that we can be more efficient between the two facilities, especially dealing with situations like the facility management, facility upkeep, as well as there's questions about IT and staffing at the front lines. The study is also looking at customer service municipality-wide in all the departments, looking for efficiencies on how we can present a solid one-stop shop for getting a number of services for the community so that they no longer need to access a number of locations. So yes, this funding will pay for the consultation covering this wide project.
Thank you for the clarification, Pam. And I, just for members of the public, this is a significant amount of payroll. We are, council is phasing that in ahead of the operation actually opening, and I believe this is a very worthwhile initiative, so thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, George, did you want to make comment?
I'm not sure which mic. Mr. Chair, just your last comment with respect to increase in payroll, I just wanted to clarify that this analysis will come forward with a number of recommendations with respect to both areas, the new Twin Pad Arena and Library, and the customer service area. So with respect to addition of new payroll, that payroll will most likely be associated with the opening of the new Twin Pad Arena and Library. There may be some costs associated with respect to the customer service counters, but that might be more related to technology as opposed to payroll. From the town standpoint, we're anxiously awaiting what the recommendations that come forward with respect to the new twin pad and library, and if there is there opportunity to phase in some of these costs. If there are costs identified, then we will explore that. But at this particular point in time, I don't want anybody to be left with the impression that there's additional payroll being added as just part of this report. This report is just dealing with the study, which may lead to additional payroll being added in connection with the new facility. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just read this motion. Coordinated Committee recommend council approve an unbudgeted expenditure of approximately $60,000 before taxes to be funded by the municipal modernization grant received from the province for the hiring of MNP consulting firm for an organizational staffing review, recreation facilities and library, and customer service delivery administration efficiency review. Report unbudgeted expense MMP. Can I have a mover and seconder? Mayor Byfolchi and Councillor Wells. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving on to accounts. The accounts will be coming forward at our August 13th, 2020 Coordinated Committee meeting for approval. And under other matters, we have the Wasaga Public, oh, that wasn't pulled, so we're good. So I will now, as a 5-minute adjournment, good for everyone? Okay, we'll take a short adjournment and then start the public works section.
But see, they can join. I don't have anybody joining, but. Thing is, it's hard.
Are we ready to go? I'm ready. Yeah. Let's get back to work. Dina, you good? No. Okay. Are we good to go?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to take the mask off for this, so no one breathe at me. Welcome back. This is going to be the Public Works section of the Coordinated Committee. Under 4.1, we have no deputations, presentations, petitions, or public meetings. Right now, there's no unfinished business on our agenda. There are no other agency reports. Under the consent agenda, there's only been one item pulled at this moment, which is 4.5.3. So unless anyone has anything else, I will read the resolution for the consent agenda that will exclude 4.5.3. Resolved that the Public Works section of the Coordinated Committee hereby receives the July 16, 2020 consent agenda items 4.4 through 4.7, and that all recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding the agenda item pulled from the motion, which will be voted on separately. I'll ask for a mover and seconder, please, for that. Councillor Wells and Deputy Mayor Bray. And all those in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously. The section 4.5.3, which is the Golf Course Road recommended traffic calming solution. The asphalt speed tables was pulled by Councillor Watson and Councillor Belanger. I'll ask Mike to join us perhaps at the table, please. And Councillor Watson, you can start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in support of the recommendation, but I would like to possibly suggest a friendly amendment if I could. And it's simply, we're in receipt of correspondence from the Residents Association and residents out there that deal with this speeding issue every day and live with it every day, and they pointed out a number of items in their correspondence to us. I would just like to take their suggestion about moving the one speed table a little further south. So we've recommended 2 locations. The residents have suggested leaving the one just on the south side of Marlwood and then moving the other one a little further south along that straight stretch. So other than that, I'm very supportive of the town's position of bringing some kind of traffic calming measure in there. So if that's possible, because the contract hasn't been awarded yet, there's been no work done, just to move the one as per the direction of the residents. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and all of council. Hopefully you can hear me all right through this. While I appreciate the comments, Councillor Watson, we did look at the traffic speeds that we did record for our study. We recorded north and south of the intersection, and for the first location that has been suggested to relocate further to the south, the 85th percentile was over 72 kilometers an hour. So I wouldn't really be comfortable with removing the one recommended location north of the intersection. The other intent with having the 2 speed tables kind of in the proximity of the intersection is that's thought to be a predominantly pedestrian heavy activity, and so we wanted to keep the intersection as safe as possible. There is speeding through that whole corridor, and so while we do appreciate the comment that there is also speeding further to the south after the S-bend, I would suggest that if we were to put a table down there, it would mean a third table. We'd have to have the two in the locations as proposed, and then add an additional one further to the south, because, I mean, there is evidence that, yeah, it's 73 kilometer an hour, 85th percentile along that section to the south as well. So it would mean an additional, you know, our estimate's about $15,000 to $18,000 for the two tables. So about half of that if we were to add a third one. For council's consideration, our recommendation was focusing on, we're implementing these traffic calming measures, we're putting in the tables, we're making a safer situation near the intersection. The alternative could be we put the two in as proposed and monitor if a third may still be warranted, but I would not recommend removing the one at the north of the intersection.
Thank you. Follow-up, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I accept that, but I would like to, I think there's a good case to be made to do more out there, whether we do a third one now or we budget for it later. But, you know, a little further along is the Park Place community, big intersection coming out there from that community. And I think I've noticed it myself, there's a lot of speeding out there. So if we could continue that program to help alleviate traffic calming, I think the residents would appreciate it. Thank you.
And Councillor Belanger, you also pulled this?
Thank you, Councillor Foster. That's certainly one of my comments, and I support Councillor Watson's position on that as well, as that a third table maybe should be a consideration in the future. The other reason I pulled it is that for the public that may have been looking for something more aggressive than a table, it wasn't mentioned in the report a significant benefit of the table, and Mike, you and I spoke about that, and I'm wondering if you could just speak to that.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chairman. So the speed tables are a permanent solution as opposed to speed humps or speed bumps. By way of, they're actually paved into the asphalt, and I have spoken with operations staff, and they're actually traversable by our plows, so they can stay out through the winter. It's not as abrupt, of course, as a speed bump or speed hump, but those would have to be seasonal. We'd have to take them out, and they weren't recommended as well by our fire chief for emergency services, you know, for emergency response. Speed humps could reduce you down to about 25 kilometers per hour, whereas the speed table does reduce you down to about 40 kilometers an hour. It's a 50 posted area, and to reduce down to 40 we think is a significant decrease from what we've seen with the speeding out there. So it certainly does provide that level of speed reduction and safety while also being conducive to emergency services and operations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Deputy Mayor Bray.
Thank you, Councillor Councillor Foster. Further to the discussion that's going on, I would like to see a third speed bump, third or fourth, depending on what you think would need to manage that section south towards Park Place. Because I've received just as many complaints about Park Place and the dangers of coming out of that driveway as I have about Marlwood and that subdivision. So I think this is a partial solution. It will never be cheaper than it is now. If we're doing two, it's probably cheaper to do 3 or 4 at the same time than wait a year, because we all know costs go up every year for the municipality. So I'm wondering if we could consider putting that third or fourth one in at the same time. And I would be willing to make an amendment to this motion if need be.
Thank you. Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Chair. To Mike, I do agree with the concept of having a north and a south table there, because yes, you want to increase pedestrian cycling safety in that area. I both drive, cycle, and run that area, so I know it can be treacherous, and I just visit that area where we do have residents that live there, so I can understand their concerns. The increase in the infrastructure, I would suggest, I would also agree with the third one. Not just alone, but in combination, because as Councillor Watson had mentioned about the other large areas of exiting and increase intersections down through the Golf Course Road area, the slowing down of the traffic along that corridor, I think, is a primary concern for the safety in there. So again, I would be in favor of a third one if we can do that. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points about adding the third one, and if we're making an amendment to the resolution. The one thing being that we'll have to consider the location of that speed table, recognizing there's going to be a new intersection in there as proposed with the Marlwood subdivision. It's going to be generally the same location that we'll have to put in that table. So, I mean, looking down the road, pardon the pun, there will be some more pedestrian activity potentially down in that area with the growth of another development. But the other thing is in terms of the budget, I know the resolution says that we would be paying for the two from our Public Works, Day Labor, and Maintenance budget. If we were to add a third, it may be prudent to say that it's and/or from the Public Works General Reserves. We may not just quite have enough in the Day Labor Maintenance budget, so just a suggestion for the amendment.
Thank you. And I'm going to make my comment before send it back to you, Councillor Watson. And I have an intimate knowledge of Golf Course Road, having lived there for 17 years. And I understand the speed on it can be frightening. A lot of the houses are set back quite a way. So, but I'm in favor of the two speed tables that we're talking about, and requesting that staff continue to monitor it as they're proposed here. The challenge is, of course, if we start adding a third one, well, then we're going to have the people who are at Klondike Meadows, which is another area, like Klondike Park. All that area can be a speedway. So I think we need to monitor and put in two immediately or as soon as possible, and then set up, there has to be some responsibility on a driver or on the OPP for enforcement of the various and sundry rules. And we could, if that's the case, we could set up speed tables at on Duncarron, on Moseley, so I think we have to look at it and create a science-based report that's going to sit there and say this is the 85th percentile and this is the speed, and see if putting in the two makes a difference. If it doesn't, then we have to look at location, and I understand there's a cost to that, but I do want to have it so that our roads can be traveled responsibly without, and people should have some personal responsibility on that. So, Councillor Watson, I believe you had something else.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would second the motion made by the Deputy Mayor, if we could, to get it on the table for a third one. And going forward, Public Works won't be surprised when I said I've been pushing to look into and research photo radar for the municipality. It's now in the Toronto region in about 50 school zones. It's in Durham and Peel. When I spoke with Inspector Brown of the OPP a few months ago, he had suggested that may be a solution. We have a lot of high-speed areas in Wasaga Beach and a lot of complaints from residents, and you can get portable photo radar units that you can move from school zones, community safety zones. It's a revenue source for the municipality, and it's also going to be safer for our residents and our school children. So I'm hoping we're going to be looking into that in the future to try and curtail some of the speeding on a number of streets in Wasaga Beach. We have a problem with speeding in the town, and I would look forward to that. But in the meantime, I would like to see at least a third one go in now while we're doing it.
Okay. Before I entertain the motion for an amendment, Your Worship, you had something on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just echo your comments. I believe that we have to have a reason. We can't just say we want more. I think we're all supportive of slowing the traffic down there, but our staff have gone through a process to see what makes sense. So to just say we're going to put in a third one, I would ask staff if they're fully supportive of that, and that there is some science behind that and some data behind that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. As I said, I did look at the traffic study that we had done when we did put out multiple speed counter locations, and yeah, the speed was evident at the area to the south that we're talking about now. Again, our thought was something's better than nothing, and there's always a balance of price and risk, and we thought that through our analysis, we figured the two speed tables should suffice for the primary concern being that residential area. Recognizing there has been other voices of concern about that area further to the south, there is some warrants to it, recognizing the speed is there and hearing these people's concerns. I wouldn't be opposed to introducing that third. That the only thing with the monitoring would be, okay, did the two tables suffice, and people now know they're going to slow down generally going through this traffic calming area. You don't know that until you see it. And of course, as you had said, there could be some cost savings by doing three at once instead of another one in the future. And I mean, the only other thing is then we are fully satisfying everyone's comments from the area. Like the original intent was to have a public meeting for this, but of course with when we came to our conclusions and put together the boards and recognizing the restrictions on gatherings, etc., we decided just to post it and share it. And had we had that meeting, it would have given opportunity to the public to give such feedback that may or may not have had bearing on our ultimate recommendation to the committee. So.
Okay, follow up, Your Worship, and then Councillor Belanger.
Okay, thank you. So there is justification to do it, and I can support that. Just
Yes.
looking if we have to make any changes to our motion with regard to where the funds come from, that's all.
Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Just a question is there any cost savings because of doing three in the same area as opposed to doing two and then having to come back later? Like, I'm kind of torn. I would support whether or not the two people have to slow down. How fast do they pick up speed again after that second table? Maybe a survey in the near future after the two tables are installed. If we're still getting speeds in excess of 65 or 70, then put in a third table. But certainly, I want the residents of Park Place to know that I'm very supportive of that we do something to ensure that the speeds are of a safe level.
Okay. Okay, we've had a discussion on this, but there was a request to do an amendment by the Deputy Mayor, and I believe we have a seconder. So the amendment would be, could you kind of define that for us, Deputy Mayor? So it's just moving it from 2 to 3 and the third one being around the corner? Like,
Which isn't specified in the motion, so yeah, staff knows where, staff will know best where to put the third one. And then further down, it says to be completed under the 2020 townwide hot mix patching contract. I'm not sure if that refers to the budget or. Sorry. Yes, so change 2 to 3. And then further down, I'm not sure where it says that it's going to be completed under the town-wide hot mix patching contract, if that needs to be adjusted to reflect the budget concern that Mike identified. It doesn't actually say it's coming out of the DIG
Yeah, I
project
realize
in
that
the
now.
motion, so maybe we're okay with that part of the motion as is.
Right. It's really because the recommendation being that the report be received for information. It's in the financial implications section of the report that we talk about which account it would be drawn from. The actual resolution doesn't say which account, it just says under which contract. So I don't know if the resolution would have to be adjusted to account for which account, or if it can be recognized by way of this discussion that, I mean, the report is being received for information, and from the presentation from staff, recognizing that some of the funds may have to be drawn from another account than as suggested, as there may not be enough funds in the maintenance account for this.
I think really the part of, so again, I have concerns. The part of the the amendment to the resolution probably should just be that a third speed table be added, as recommended by staff. I guess my concern is the financing piece, we don't know. We could be sitting there saying, hey, if it's another $5,000 for sake of argument, is there room in the day labor to absorb that? We don't know that until you go price it out. So, I mean, we can, if we ask to do a third one, staff could go back and say that there would not be enough money to do it, therefore it has to go through a whole budget process, and it may stop the entire thing. I think we should be looking at putting in the two and directing staff to cost out the third and put it in as soon as possible. There's going to be lots of day labor projects throughout the summer. But anyway, I'll leave it. Your worship.
I was just going to say, I'm looking to the CAO and the clerk. They both look like they might want to say something, so maybe they could advise us on this.
Thank you, Mayor Barfolti. I think that if Deputy Mayor Bray is wishing to move an amendment to the motion, and Councillor Watson is seconding that motion, that we add a third paragraph that describes what Councillor Bray is moving, and that would be that the third speed table be added at that location, and that perhaps that third speed table is funded from Public Works General Reserves. Not necessarily saying what the amount is. If it is less than the amount of these two tables, then I'm certain that Mr. Pincevero could update council, but that not to exceed could be added, not to exceed the amount that is for each of these tables could be added to that third paragraph, so that it's read to say that, and further that staff be directed to install a third speed table with that location, to be funded from general reserves, not to exceed, I'm sorry, Mike, if you could interject.
$8,000.
$8,000. That's
Okay.
just my suggestion.
Thank you for that clarification. CAO?
Thank you, Councillor. I think the clerk is correct. The steps, though, are typically any additional project like this would be funded from any year-end surplus that may exist in the Public Works Department first. And if there wasn't sufficient funds in any year-end surplus, then we would go to reserve. So the amount, as the manager of engineering has indicated, is probably in the range between $7,000 and $9,000. So although it's a significant amount of money when you consider the overall Public Works Department budget, it's not significant. So I think that within the overall Public Works budget, that the funds could be found to fund the additional table. So the wording of the motion as it stands, I think that's paramount. I think the direction would be that from an operational standpoint, is the funds would be found within the overall Public Works budget. Thank you.
Okay, I might look to the clerk too, because we're actually debating something we haven't done a vote on. So there was a mover and a seconder to put forward an amendment. So we should see if there's support for that before we debate the amendment. Is there not?
Correct, and I don't believe we're debating the amendment. We're looking for some sort of wording that would work for Deputy Mayor Bray's amendment.
Okay.
And I think that we clarified wording that would likely work for the Deputy Mayor's amendment motion, and we'll move that and second it, and then if that is approved, then we will read the full motion and put that to a vote.
All right, we've had a bit of a chat on this. So Councillor Wells, you had something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm just going to say I'm most sympathetic to the concerns of the ratepayers down there, and I recognize for sure that there is a speed issue along Golf Course Road. there's also a speed issue in numerous other places within the community. The recommendation that came forward today is based on data that was collected over a significant period of time using the speed monitors and brought forward this recommendation. I will not support the amendment because it is simply arbitrarily suggesting to add something that is not based on any reliable or even collected data that warrants the necessity. I think my position would be that we go ahead with the recommendation that has been given to us by Public Works, which, as I said, is based on solid data. And then, once those are in place for a short, medium period of time, then we go back and we resurvey the area and take a whole new data collection to see what impact those speed tables have had, if any, and whether or not the other stretches of that road continue to show the significant speeding issues that will need further attention. In the interim, as I said, we have numerous other places within town where complaints have been about speeding. And again, I think we should be acting on collected data, not acting on emotion. So thank you. I won't support the amendment at this time.
Okay, I think we'll go to the amendment. Is that all right, Deputy Mayor Bray?
If I could just respond to some of the, yeah, it's on. Sorry. I think that the engineering supervisor was quick to point out that there is data that supports speeding. Traffic comes from both the north and the south. There is data, scientific data, that supports a potential solution down there. If we defer it and we wait to do a study after we install the first two, we're delaying another year. To the residents that live down there that have been writing to us for the last 2 or 3 years looking for some solution, I don't think it's necessary. We're talking $7,000 to $9,000 in our total budget of how many millions of dollars. I think we should be trying this.
Okay, so we got definition of what the amendment will be. So it will be adding a third, to paraphrase, it'll be adding a third table south of the existing proposal with the budget to come out of the Public Works overall general reserves. That's what we're going to be voting on. And I believe it's the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Watson, and the clerk is, yes.
I believe the CAO indicated general year-end surplus for the funding.
Okay,
Year-end surplus.
thank you, under the year-end surplus. Okay, thank you for that definition. But we have a mover and a seconder, correct? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Watson? Yeah? All right, so on that amendment, that will be wordsmithed more or less as we just said, I'll ask all those in favor of that. And opposed? And that is actually carried, and a vote of 5-2 with myself and Councillor Wells opposing it. So that takes us back to the original resolution that will have the words "as amended" added to the very end. So I'll read it, then ask for a mover and seconder on this one. It's resolved that Public Works section of the Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the Golf Course Road recommended traffic calming solution asphalt speed tables for information, and further that staff be directed to award the paving works to install the 2 speed tables to McQueen View Paving to be completed under the 2020 townwide hot mix patching contract as amended, or the resolution as amended. So I'll ask for a mover and seconder for that. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Kinney. And all those in favor of that one? Opposed? And that's carried 6-1 with Councillor Wells opposing. And that is the end of the Public Works section of the Coordinated Committee. We'll take 5 minutes. We'll resume approximately at 10:30. Thank you.
would like to call the meeting back to order with the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee. Deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings. We had a public meeting at 9 o'clock this morning. Unfinished business, there's a list on the file. No comments or questions? Other agency reports, there are none. We have a consent agenda today with one item pulled, and that is item 5.5.7, proposed amendment number 1 to a Places to Grow, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Is there anything else anyone would like to see pulled? Seeing none. It is resolved that the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the July 6, 2020 consent agenda, items 5.4 through to 5.7, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Wells, and a seconder? Councillor Kinney? All in favor? And that motion passes unanimously. So the one item pulled was item 5.5.7. First councillor to pull that would have been Councillor Boulanger.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Or, sorry, Deputy Mayor Bray, I said that a few times earlier too. My apologies. I'd like to add a comment to the report on Places to Grow, and it stems from the fact that as we go through the report, they're recommending flexibility in the policy related to aggregate operations and endangered species. And first of all, I think there probably needs to be a little more detail around that. But the comment I'd like to add is the fact that I believe there also needs to be more flexibility related to endangered species as it relates to Wasaga Beach being a desirable place to live, a desirable place to start a new business, and also how current policy impacts social distancing opportunities during COVID. And that is to say, and I want to make it very clear, I'm a strong supporter in protecting the environment and endangered species, but I do believe some of our policies are excessive. Having a 10-year moratorium around a nest of a piping plover and the 1 kilometer range from the nest is, in my view, excessive. We have, it's also excessive that we allow vegetation to grow right to the water's edge and don't keep a reasonable space clear of vegetation, not just for recreational activities. The experts also say that the piping plovers also prefer that. I believe somewhat the policy has saved the ministry money in not having to maintain the beach. But we have now large stretches of beach that have really become unruly. They can't be enjoyed for recreational activities. In some cases, I've been told it's been 4 or 5 years since a piping plover have nested in the area. That's protected, and we still have another 6 years to go. So I would like us to add comment to the Places to Grow to look at a little more flexibility related some of the policy around endangered species, specifically for Wasaga Beach.
Thank you for your comments. I think staff are welcome to adding content into the letter to the province as council sees fit.
Thank you. Next one to speak was Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a very important document to all the municipalities in the county, but especially to Wasaga Beach. And there's a lot of information to digest, and I really commend Alan and Adam on this report. It's a very detailed report where we're going. I just had one question or suggestion, and I did talk with planning a little earlier to give them a heads up on it. Based on the removal of Schedule 7, which had a planning horizon of 2031, And as we are recommending supporting the proposed policies to extend the planning horizon from 2041 to 2051, I'm referring to the designated built-up area map, which is Figure 1 in the report. These lines delineate two different zones in the municipality, primary built-up area and a secondary area of Wasaga. My suggestion would be, or adding comment, should we not be looking at expanding our DBA, our designated built-up area, shown on Figure 1? This line was probably established in 04-05 and concluded in 2006, just before the growth plan came in. The town is virtually serviced with sewer and water throughout from end to end, and to leave the boundary status as status quo is possibly missing an opportunity for development lands that will be hard to rectify in the future. My analysis sometimes is it's like doing an OP. It's easier to change it when you're doing an OP review than trying to do it when it's set in stone. So it's just a thought whether we should be looking at that or not. Thank you. And other than that, I think it's a great report, and thank you for your comments.
Councillor Watson. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. When I looked at this report, and I've commented on it, Bill 108, way back when we first, I think in 2019, when this came forward last month, there was a notice that it was coming to us. I had asked about the environmental impact. Now I can support what, the motion as a whole here, because for the town there's not a lot of impact necessarily, but the section that concerns me is again Section 3, the environmental impact piece, and specifically in this case they're talking about new mineral or aggregate and quarries within natural heritage systems, and they're changing the rules related to habitats of endangered species and threatened species. So in other words, they can now go into a place that has, whether it's a plover or a turtle or whatever, and put in a pit or a quarry of some sort. And I have huge issues with that. It's not specifically for Wasaga Beach. I don't imagine they're going to be putting in pits and quarries in the area we have left, but I do have issues for the county as a whole and the province even larger. So I believe that we should be objecting to the Section 3. As for the plovers, I mean, I have real concerns about endangered species. There's a reason they get that name about them. It's not that they're running around everywhere. So I believe it is incumbent on us as a community, but as a larger community, as the county and as the province, to push to keep places that are endangered, because these species are, the species at risk or endangered species are part of a bigger ecosystem. And I know a plover isn't going to lead to the end of Mosley Street as we know it, but there is interconnection between our environment and ourselves. And I do believe that the current pandemic is kind of proof that if we don't pay attention to it, it comes back to haunt us. So I don't agree with supporting the change to the environmental piece at all, and that's my comment related to that.
Thank you. Did you want to make any comments, Adam?
Yes, thank you. I think to clarify the interest relating to the built boundary, it may have been worth expanding on in the report the particular application of this boundary. It is a bit arbitrary, it being delineated in 2006. It really is only applied for how we calculate intensification within that boundary or density targets outside of that boundary. So it is really only used for that purpose and isn't applicable for example, where we may or may not grow as a community.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. Resolve that Development Services Section, a coordinated committee, recommends that council receive the staff report on the proposed amendment number 1 to the province as a place to grow, growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe for information, and that the Development Services Section, a coordinated committee, recommends that council direct and authorize staff to submit the attached draft letter to the province in response to the proposed amendment number 1 to the province as a place to grow, growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe in the substantial form as contained in the staff report. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Watson, Councillor Kinney, all in favor? And that passes unanimously. And that concludes the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee. We will take a 5-minute break. Oh, sorry, one moment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had asked to speak to the NVCA report. I had asked to have it pulled, which is 5.7.1.
I apologize. Is it too late to speak to something we have voted on? Okay, so before we conclude the meeting, if Councillor Watson would like to make comments on 5.7.1, the NVCA report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Clerk, for allowing me to speak to this report. This National Disaster Mitigation Program flood mapping project is again an important document for the town of Wasaga Beach. It was a $146,000 project with 50% of the project funded by the federal government, and Wasaga Beach contributed 19%, $28,000, and the NVCA contributed approximately 31% to it. The project was initiated in September of 2016, and the deadline to submit the final report was March 2020. Almost 4 years have gone by, as has the March deadline, and still no final deliverables from the NVCA. Wasaga Beach is in the process of updating their official plan, and this flood mapping report is supposed to be part of that review, and our planning staff require the final report to ensure the town is sufficiently satisfied that the floodplain modeling properly represents flood hazards within the town of Wasaga Beach. Both Wasaga Beach and the NVCA passed motions to have this report peer-reviewed by a third-party engineering company, Greenland of Collingwood, and they are still waiting for information also. Our Director of Planning and Economic Development, Mr. Doug Herron, has had a chance to comment on the preliminary modeling, which was presented to him in February of 2020. He identified immediately 5 areas of concern. He felt it will be imperative that the NVCA staff be available to answer questions from the public on the property impacts of the new floodplain modeling before it goes live and is applied as a regulatory document. Conservation authorities, unlike municipalities, do not invite public consultation on their decisions, but Wasaga Beach feels it is required to be accountable to the public, and I, as the conservation representative of the NVCA board, strongly agree with our position. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I imagine planning is listening to these comments. And now the mayor, would you wish to speak?
Thank you. Just to say, I echo Councillor Watson's comments. This has gone on far too long. There's been delays. Things that were supposed to be shared with the third party were delayed, and there was issues. And I really, if we need to send a letter, whatever we need to do to keep things moving here, and we do have properties that are going to be affected by this. And I think we need to make sure that we are heard about our concerns for that, and that it not just get blanketed under something that the Conservation Authority is doing, because it will have impacts on those other. And I'll just look to Councillor Watson. Should Council be sending something to the NVCA to confirm that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I think we should be strongly involved with this. It was on the last NVCA agenda package, and I brought all these concerns forward at that meeting also, pointing out the long delays and the lack of accountability. I know our planning department has been asking for information, and it's not forthcoming. unless it's changed in the last couple of weeks. So I think, yeah, we need to be very involved with this and hold them accountable and be to the public, to let them know what's going to be affected by them, because they can simply draw lines on a map and someone 5 years later comes up and says, oh, I didn't know that happened. That's just how it happens. So thank you.
Rabbi Fulci?
Thank you. And just to say, I'm the chair for the county's regional government review of service delivery, and we will be reviewing conservation authorities in more depth. But I think if we can put a letter to the Conservation Authority, copied to the appropriate minister to bring their attention to our concerns with this situation, I think it would be helpful, because it has been ongoing and, it seems to be a fight the whole way through, and we just want to get the proper data so that we're planning properly.
Mr. Cieo?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just, it may be helpful to ask the Director of Planning and Economic Initiatives to just provide a brief update to committee in terms of his conversations with the NVCA, so that committee has the most current information with respect to where the status of this project is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kinney, can your question wait?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Heron, if you could educate us.
Good morning and thank you. The last conversation I had with the Director of Planning for the NVCA on this topic was approximately 2 weeks ago, and we discussed each of the receiving from the NVCA an electronic version of the modeling in its current form, so that we as town staff could do a more detailed assessment of just how many properties in Wasaga Beach are either affected by an improvement, so relief from flooding, floodplain lines, or are more significantly impacted from the flooding, just so that we can gain a better understanding internally in Wasaga Beach of what the modeling will look like and how it will impact development going forward in Wasaga Beach. So we've not received a copy of that electronic modeling yet, albeit we understand that the modeling is not finalized. We also discussed the opportunity for the town to prepare an open house or some type of public commenting venue, and that we would be asking NVCA staff to attend at that open house or public venue to present this new modeling to the public, because it will have a significant impact on local landowners. And albeit this is not a planning process where the public will be able to comment on it, staff feel that it is important that we at least present that to the public so that they understand what's happening to the regulations affecting their properties. There's a third discussion on the element of getting comments and input from Greenlands, which is a third party not directly associated with the contract for the creation of the modeling, but they are knowledgeable, some would say the most respected consulting firm in the area when it comes to floodplain modeling. So we believe that there is some value to the town of Wasaga Beach to get that input, because at the end of the day, we want to have the most absolutely correct modeling that we would apply to our official plan. So that's where it stands right now. In terms of providing a letter, it was something that staff through the planning department were going to do anyway, to summarize these comments in a letter to the director of at the planning at the NVCA. So the thought coming from council mirrors the thought coming from staff. So I would be happy to prepare that draft. Be happy to sign the letter, unless I get direction that it be signed from another individual at the town.
You're happy with that? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Heron. Seeing no other issues, I will adjourn. Oh, I apologize. Councillor Kinney had a question.
That's okay, Madam Chair. I get used to it down here. No, Madam Chair, I just wanted to make a comment that our worship mayor has already mentioned that a letter drafted by council should not only go to the MVCA, but it should go up the food chain to the province, where maybe it'll trickle back down on the listen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, did you have something to say, or were you just?
Before we take a break for general government section, there is nothing that's pulled for the general government section, so if council would like to carry on and not take a break, we're happy to do so.
Thank you. Okay, well, hearing that, I will pass the chair over to Councillor Wells for the general government section of Coordinated Committee.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. General Government Section, Coordinated Committee, we have the only unfinished business. We have no deputations. The unfinished business is a signed bylaw review, and we know that is coming forward eventually. The consent agenda, there has been nothing pulled from the agenda at this point in time, so unless I see something different, I will ask for I'll read the motion and then ask for movers and seconders. It's resolved that General Government Section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the July 16th, 2020 consent agenda, items number 6.4 through 6.7, and that the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voting on separately, which there were none. So I need a mover and Councillor Foster, and a seconder, Councillor Kinney. And all in favor? It is carried without any objection. So we are adjourned.
We'll need about 10 minutes to start the next.
Okay, so we have a special council meeting starting in 10 minutes? 10 minutes, which would be about 11:05, or 11:05, sorry. Thank you.